by pulling either of the ends of the knot, since both the ends are projected upwards. In another situation, when the sadhaka loses himself in samadhi without the knowledge and control, in order to bring him down to consciousness, the knot must be deknotted so that he may come back to consciousness. Thus, the kaupina and the knot performs wonderfully with the sadhaka and his sadhana. Wearing a loose shorts is a potential health hazard. Walking produces the constant friction to the generative organ, which will unnecessarily be erecting, thus causing a lot of waste of energy, both nervous and electrochemical. It should be held tightly under check, not excessively, but tenderly. Again, people are found to handle their organs, a most awkward habit indeed, organs constantly causing it to erect. All this is competently avoided by the constant use of kaupina, a short without stitches. The wearing of kaupina is mandatory for both females and males. Teenagers below the age of 16 are exempted, if need be, from wearing kaupina. Instead, they are allowed to use tight shorts. Next point, no shaving of head, please. Human hair is very strong. If a rope is made with the hairs of a normal adult person, it could support a suspended weight of a Maruti car. Hair growth 3/8 inches to 3/4 inches a month, faster in summer than in winter, faster during day than night. Hair is formed in follicles, little tubes folded into the skin, connected with blood vessels, so that cells can form and grow. The new cells push the old ones up the follicle, and these old cells undergo a process called keratinization, which turns them into hair. Keratin is a chemical formed in fingernails and bones of a cow. Since hair is no longer composed of living cells, it is said to be dead, so cutting it does not hurt us. Attached to the hair are miniature muscles which, by contracting, can erect the hairs. In the cold, these hairs are erected to create extra insulation, while anxiety leads to stimulation of muscles by the sympathetic nervous system. This is described as goose pimple effect. The yogic scientists perhaps knew more about the hair than us, the moderners. They have assigned the human hair a better functioning. Remember what was said about the static electricity that our body will be producing. Static electricity is so called because it remains stationary on the surface of an object, as opposed to the familiar current that flows in a wire. At the heart of both is the negatively charged electron. The shock one gets after walking across a wool rug on cool, dry days comes from a static electricity charge, a charge composed of electrons rubbed from the rug onto the shoe soles. The rug's atoms, with their electron deficiency, becomes positively charged while those in the show and hence one's body are negatively charged. A spark made up of these excess electrons will jump from the fingers to a grounded object such as a human being. An object charged this way tend to attract another object with an opposite charge and repel one with a similar charge. Consider an example. A person is standing on a wooden stool and is thus suitably insulated. When he touches the globe of a powerful static electricity generator and is being charged with 1,000,000 volts, all that he gets is a tingle and a gooseflesh effect, a fuzzy hairdo. Since the hair have the same powerful electrical charge, they repel one another to produce the hair-raising effect. High voltage of current generated in the body during the course of japa and more so in tapa is to be discharged sometimes under peculiar circumstances, and air act as channels of dissipation. In case the head is shaven constantly, the system is disturbed and the flow is held in check by the inside of the scalp. This may prove unsafe and damaging. Sebum, secreted by the millions of glands located near the roots of hair, is suppressed from oozing out. Sebum forms a protective mixture with the sweat to keep the scalp moist and pliable. Sex glands and hairs are connected. When the head is clean shaved of hair, they will cause extensive excitation in the muscles and nerves served by them. They reflexly crowd the centers located in the hypothalamus, and hypothalamus in turn will be causing excitation of pituitary and adrenal glands. They will be secreting hormones which excite sexual organs. Now the next most important component, japa. By japa is meant the practice of yoga vidya in the preliminary stage. The practice of japa leads the practitioner to the practice of tapa and then to yoga, which should result in the realization of sakshatkara, paramapadvi and brahmatva in the same order. Japa is a biotechnique very closely following the process of respiration, serves 4 functional aspects of the living organism: pulmonary ventilation, which means the inflow and outflow of air between the atmosphere and the living alveoli; diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between alveoli and blood; and then the transport of the above O2 and CO2 in the blood and the body fluids to and from the cells, and regulation of respiration. Almost all life depends on chemical reaction with oxygen to produce energy. Organisms receive oxygen from the atmospheric air, which is 20.84% by volume. The air is drawn in through the nasal cavities and it enters the lung alveoli through nasopharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi and bronchioles. Oxygen is carried to the different tissues in the form of oxyhemoglobin of the red blood. Under normal conditions, about 5 ml of oxygen is transported by each 100 ml of blood, and the normal cardiac output is about 5000 ml per minute. Therefore, the total quantity of oxygen delivered to the tissues each minute is about 250 ml. There are about 75 trillion cells in the human body, and the quantity of oxygen available for their optimal activity seems to be inadequate. Also, it is likely that a number of cells, particularly the brain cells, may not be within the reach of the oxygen supply. The organism within it contains a technique meant to augment the oxygen supply to the tissues manifold. The human intelligence consists in noticing this technique and then employ it for the welfare of one's own organism. This biotechnique is named as JAPA. How does JAPA augment the supply of oxygen? What else does it do other than this? By way of answer, we say JAPA is a multifaceted biotechnique. In its initial stage, it concerns air and respiration. JAPA starts with Vayu Mathana, meaning the churning of air, Vayu meaning air. The air is put to rhythmic upward and downward movement in the posterior part of the nasopharynx, just behind and above the uvula region. The vigorous movement, Gatagate, of air produces an audible sound. Uvula is a soft extension of the soft palate that hangs from the root of the mouth above the root of the tongue. Its vibration produces sound. The Gatagati of air should be long, vigorous and brisk. This increased Gatagati results in the increased cardiac output. The rate of oxygen transport can be increased to about 15 to 20 times the normal in JAPA. Therefore, the higher rate of oxygen transport to the tissues can be 15 into 20 ml or 3750 ml per minute or more. That is, variations are indicated. Oxygen, that is O2, is an odorless and colorless gas that makes up 1/5 of the atmosphere. It is essential to most forms of life in that it combines chemically with glucose or some other fuel to provide energy for the metabolic process. It is taken up by the capillaries of the lung alveoli and is released to the tissues and carbon dioxide, CO2, absorbed by the blood. Then CO2 is released from the blood and released out of the body. This way, organism receives excessive supply of oxygen, thereby nullifying the oxygen debt, if any. Yogi Achyuta is like this. A number of cells which were beyond the reach of collateral circulation also get their nutrients through the newly opened channels. Subsequently, the cells are found to function at their optimal potentialities. In the long, vigorous and brisk Gata-gati in JAPA, perceptible heat and static electricity is produced. A part of oxygen is converted into ozone. The ozone is also released through the blood. But the ozone content in the atmospheric air is just 0.000002%. Heat and electrostatic energy thus produced activate the olfactory receptors in the nasal cavity. This graded potency passes through the olfactory nerves via cribriform plate and reaches the limbic system. The limbic system includes limbic lobe and associated subarticle nuclei such as the amygdaloid complex, septal nuclei, hypothalamus, epithalamus, that is the pineal body, habenular nucleus, stria medullaris, epithelial root of the third ventricle, and the anterior thalamic nuclei and parts of the basal ganglia and midbrain reticular formation. One side view, sports persons might be tempted to claim that increased cardiac output and the increased supply of oxygen is also noticed in vigorous physical exercises and more particularly in the sprinters. But here the organism consumes more energy in its excited state and gets into fatigue state almost immediately. Wear and tear to the body is certainly more. In contrast, on the other hand, the situation in JAPA is just reversed. Positioned in only one posture, the organism, through brisk Gata-gati and increased cardiac output, will be able to produce and conserve more energy. And then wear and tear to the organism is almost nil. The organism, in fact, feels energized. Now, I would like to give a sensational discovery by the Vedic Maharshis. Maharshis, Siddhas and Yogis were the masters who could explain expertly the cosmic creation and its subtle functioning. For them, their own organisms were the laboratories and the practice of yoga was the experiment. What they declared after discoveries defy present-day logic and reasoning. Let us explain a few of them. 1. Neonatal babies have native air within their organism at the time of birth. External air enters the organism after birth. The 17th mantra of Ishavasyopanishad states unambiguously that Gata-gati in JAPA and later in Tapa cannot take place with only the atmospheric air that enters the organism through the nose. In fact, Gatagati involves two types of airs, one the native and the other anila, the atmospheric air. The dead cannot be revived by any amount of pumping of oxygen into the dead body owing to the dissipation of the native vayu. Now, the question is, from where the native air comes into the fetus? Oh, the answer once again is emphatic, that Pranan produces vayu, pranad vayu rajayate, meaning prana produces vayu. In any living organism, there shall be found pure air, suddha vayu, directly produced by the pranan in its vibration in the region of diencephalon. Pranan also is located on the floor of the third ventricle. Pranan is the master bodybuilder under the supervision of Atman. Then the vayu found in the organism down under the brain region is the one produced and stored there by the pranan while the organs are being formed in the mother's womb. Then the second one, the pranan, the vital and dynamic force that controls the organism, needs a specific fuel as nutrient for its efficient functioning. The Vedic scientists call this fuel as asana or anna. Both simply mean food. Asana is, at the lower level of life, is ozone. In the initial practice of japa, Gatagati accomplishes the twin objective of simplifying O2 and O3 to the bodily tissues through the blood and the pranan respectively. The quantity of both O2 and O3 being supplied by the natural respiratory and cardiac output is simply inadequate. Then japa, and only japa, by its peculiar technique, can augment the supply of both more than adequately. We say thus that japa supplies asana to pranan on a daily basis. The presumption then is that one should do japa so that one can live longer and not otherwise. Japa then is a natural biological technique given by nature to man so that he can live longer, healthily and happily. In the most advanced stages of yoga sadhana, one can survive without the aid of external air. The necessary air is created by pranan in his region of diencephalon. The third one, the amazing fact, the locus of pranan is the floor of fourth ventricle of the diencephalon, and that of Atman is the third ventricle. Though pranan is derived from the Atman cannot survive without pranan. Both are co-reals and co-eternals. By the activation of the limbic system, the practitioners will immediately be experiencing the following: controlled emotional reaction, increased or decreased cardiovascular response as per the need, increased gastrointestinal motility and salivation, therefore no indigestion at all, increased hunger and sleep, and increased secretion of gonadotropin, adrenocorticotropic hormone ACTH from the anterior pituitary. Then stimulation of the amygdaloid nuclei, bringing pleasurable sensation. Then controlled circadian and other biological rhythms. Then it brings on positive behavioral changes and higher motivation. And it stimulates higher intellectual thought and thought processes and improves memory. Now comes the most important and interesting thing called Tapa. After Japa comes Tapa. As explained earlier, in the process of Vayu Mathana, when air is churned, that is Gatagati of Vayu, as part of doing Japa, the supply of O2 and O3 get augmented. Increased quantity of O2 reaches the body tissues via blood supply, while O3 reaches Pranan as part of his daily offering of asana to it. Asana is the nutrient of Pranan. Anna is another name of asana. Incidentally, the Holy Bible talks of manna. Manna was food provided by God for the Israelites during their 40 years in the desert. See Exodus 16. It is food that gives spiritual refreshment and nourishment. As such, manna's resemblance to Anna is striking and significant. Just as butter is obtained by churning of buttermilk, asana is obtained by churning of Vayu Mathana. If churning of Vayu is not resorted to through Japa, the availability of O3 is awfully insufficient. Asana is therefore Ishwaramsa, meaning the portion of Ishvara. The practice of Japa gets stabilized when the practitioner is capable of sitting for 3 hours at a time. The body gets attuned and mind begins to adapt to the new activity. When the duration of Japa crosses 5 hours in one sitting, the state of Tapa dawns. Here the role of Pranan and Manas are highlighted. Then enters Atman. Then comes self-actualization called Sakshatkara. This state is mediated by the process called Pranayama. When the need for asana by the Pranan is being met on a daily basis, the latter gets fortified and immediately becomes active and then begins to function in a decisive way. Pranan surveys the structure and functioning of the organism and notes what is amiss there. The one thing that becomes evident is the wayward behavior of Manas, much of which is inimical to the welfare of the self. What then Pranan does is to summon it and reprimand it to behave. Manas is, after all, a slave to the sense organs. This is reversed. This process of Manas beginning to dote Pranan is what is called Prana Manomilanam. Now, before going further in the analysis of tapas, it is necessary that the Pranan is analyzed more in detail. Now comes the Pranan. The human organism is a biological aggregate of about 75 trillion cells, organized into different functional structures, some of which are called organs. Each functional structure provides its share in the maintenance of homeostatic conditions in the extracellular fluid, which is called the internal environment. As long as normal conditions are maintained in the internal environment, the cells will function properly. Thus, each cell benefits from homeostatic, and in turn each cell contributes its share towards the maintenance of homeostatics. This reciprocal interplay provides continuous automaticity of the organism until one or more functional systems lose their ability to contribute the share of function. When this occurs, all the cells suffer. This way, extreme dysfunction leads to death, while moderate dysfunction leads to sickness. Death is the cessation of life. The continued automaticity of the organism has no business to dysfunction when the necessary nutrients are supplied. But it does dysfunction nevertheless. Why is this so? Life as an event starts from the moment of fertilization, that is conception, and it gets terminated when the organism ceases to function. The question is, how does life start and why does this end? What is the force that controls the events from conception to death? Fertilization takes place with the union of two gametes. Gamete is a sex cell with the union of spermatozoon of the male and the ovum of the female. A new sequence of events called gestation or pregnancy takes place. The fertilized cell ovum in the female develops into fetus, and thus a new unit of life develops. The human cell nuclei contains 46 chromosomes coming in 23 pairs called diploid. Chromosomes are composed of genes, and genes carry heredity. Gametes, however, are haploid, having only half its number of chromosomes, that is 23. Each sex cell, therefore, will be contributing half this number. Thus they unite to form a zygote, that is fertilized ovum, which is the correct number of chromosomes, that is 46. Zygote, so tiny as to be barely visible, grows into a fetus by cell division called mitotic division. It divides into two cells, which then divides into 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on. At the moment of fertilization, section, everything about the individual is fixed. And this is the beginning of what is called life. Death results following the termination of life process. Now, the question is, how does life start and why does it cease to function? The one-term answer is Pranan. The automaticity of the organism is so only because it is planned that way. Pranan is the key here. When the union of spermatozoon of the male and the ovum of the female takes place and a zygote is formed, an unusual sequence takes place, that is, at that precise moment, both the Atman and Pranan together enter ovum and fertilization has taken place. This Pranan is the controller of life process. How? All organisms require oxygen for survival because all life depends on chemical reaction with oxygen to produce energy. Oxygen is carried to the cells through the bloodstream, but the organism on a whole or some of the organs dysfunction for no apparent reason, even when the circulation of oxygen is normal. The real force behind the function or dysfunction of the organism seems to be other than oxygen. The real force behind the functioning is Pranan. It exercises its executive control through the central nervous system. The locus of Pranan is the floor of fourth ventricle of the diencephalon. It is this force which initiates and sustains the process of fertilization, fetal growth, its birth, and the entire span of life until death. Pranan, along with Atman, penetrates the ovum through spermatozoon, and this aids fertilization. It is therefore supposed by the yogic scientists that the father is reborn in the shape of his progeny. This is mentioned in Aitareya Upanishad, 2nd, 1:1 to 1:4. Vayu, which contains oxygen among other gases, is in reality a product of Pranan. When Pranan vibrates in space, as in the cosmos above, or in the organism here, Vayu is produced. They do have separate existence. Vayu is very much venerated, and rightly so, because it happens to be the first in chain of events that leads one to go up to the Absolute. The sequence worth recounting here is: Vayu reaches one to the Pranan, Pranan reaches one to the Atman, Atman reaches us to Brahmatva, and from Brahmatva to the Absolute. Therefore, since without the lowest the highest, and without the lowest the highest cannot be reached, the Vayu found to everyone as atmospheric air is venerated. Vayu thus has to function under the control of Pranan, yet it is vital for the survival of Pranan. How? We have already noted the mechanism of O2 and O3. At least in the initial stages, Vayu alone is so constituted as to supply oxygen to the tissues and O3 to the Pranan. In the rhythmic and brisk Gatagati of Vayu in JAPA, part of the O3 is recovered from the air and the other part by converting O2 into O3. Pranan is asanagataha, that Pranan is having asana as its nutrient. You deny asana to Pranan, then you deny legitimacy for the Pranan to rule the body for an indefinite period. Then comes the rise, the rule, and the potential Pranan. Let us see it. Man is born with a body full of organs. It is built by Pranan with the raw materials available within itself. Imagine how a single fertilized egg becomes a big person by its internal resources. The human body builds up itself by techniques very foreign to human mind. It is not made of extraneous material like a house. It is composed of cells as house is of bricks. But it is not a mere assemblage of cells as if the house originated from one brick, a magic brick that would set out manufacturing other bricks. These bricks, without waiting for the bricklayers, would assemble themselves and form the walls. They would also metamorphose into window panes, roofing materials, water for the kitchen and bathroom. An organ developed by means of similar to those attributed to fairies in the tales told to children by their grandmas. It is the same cells which synthesize not only the building material but also the workers. It is all amazing. Well, can you call this a blinder automatic process by the tiny cell? No. It's reality. In reality, those imaginative and foresighted act is executed by the mighty Pranan upon a blueprint drawn by Atman, the master of everything found in the organism. Something more will be told later. Pranan thus is present in every cell in a micro quantity, but dwelling in the diencephalon region in full measure. Pranan is a force capable of pulsating indefinitely in the organism, provided its needs are met. Otherwise, it prefers to quit. If it ever remains pure like an electric charge, it blows the fuse and escapes when its laws of living and are disobeyed and violated. It lies dormant almost after birth, since man does not recognize its existence and therefore starves it. Its functioning is below normal. It's only in JAPA that it gets its asana to a significant extent and then begins to rise up and be counted as the master of the organism. Then it actually begins to rule over the domain, since it knows each and every cell by contact. It can look after their welfare as the mother would of her children. In fact, Pranan is called Uma, the mother. Its Ashana or Anna is called Rai or Virat. It is said in Purusha Sukta, in Prashna Upanishad also. The ever-active Pranan is known as Kriya Shakti. It needs no rest and can function perpetually. Since it is only a powerhouse without consciousness, it needs some other power to guide it. In Sankhya Darshana, Pranan is described as blind and Atman as lame. It is the blind Pranan that carries the lame Atman, and it is the Atman which conducts the life's journey purposefully. In this way, Atman is termed as Ichha Shakti, a power with super consciousness and super scheming ability. When Manas joins Pranan in the initial stage of Tapa, the bond is carried forward and upwards in the diencephalon region. The Pranan is inherently motivated to rejoin the Lord Atman from whence it was separated in the fetal state to build the organism and to administer it. Pranan, after all, is Uma, the female, nurturing energy to rejoin her Lord, who may be termed Maheswara. Atma is Maheswara. Pranan is Uma. In fact, Maheswara is well known as Ardhanariswara, half female and half male. His one half descends as Uma and he remaining as the other half. After its awakening, Asanagatha, Pranan, keeping Manas as its companion, begins to make sincere efforts to move upwards towards Atman. The efforts of Pranan to ascend is called Pranayama, the ayama of Pranan. For this process to take place, the sadhaka should be able to sit for a very long period at one go. He should be entering into the meditative mode bereft of external consciousness, but fully conscious internally within himself. It is necessary here to contrast the Vayumadhana done at the Japa state and the Pranayama that take place in the Tapa state. In Vayumadhana, the sadhaka will be exerting his energy to do the Gatagati. It is a conscious effort without which heat is not supplied to Pranan. Gatagati is a must for these events to take place. But what happens in the Tapa state is radically different. As noted earlier, a full moded sound is produced in Gatagati of Vayu. The sound is what the practitioner produces with intent and purpose. Organism gets cleaned, the manas begins to react to the sound while being swayed to the rhythm of the sound. This way, there takes place disentanglement of manas from its distracting sense organs and their stimuli. This ensures concentration of mind without any effort on the sadhaka's part. In pranayama, something unique takes place. In japa, the sadhaka stops making the sound and then sits in silence, beginning to meditate. Since manas is still wild and uncontrolled, concentration is not at all possible at the earlier stage. Two things are necessary to get concentration. One, the full control of manas by the pranan, and two, the sadhaka's ability into entering the meditative mode. For the latter to happen, longer duration of japa and tapa is necessary. When these conditions are met, a sadhaka will effortlessly be able to be observed fully in tapas. With manas firmly under control and meditation already started, all the organs and systems of control of the organism are powerfully quietened, and then Pranan readies itself to make the upward journey towards its Lord. And this is the beginning of Pranayama. By Pranayama, we mean the movement of Pranan all by itself without one's conscious effort. The movement of Pranan is accompanied by a sound which is described as Pranava. Pranava is the natural sound of Pranan produced in its movement towards upwards journey. The sound can be heard by the practitioner clearly, and it resembles the sound of Om when orally chanted. Since it is heard as Om, the Pranava is known as Om, A-U-M, Om. Pranava is held sacred since it is the natural sound of Pranan, the mighty force. It is termed primordial since Pranan emerged at the time of creation with a loud sound resembling Om. Maybe this event strongly resembles the Big Bang theory of the astronomers. Very many and varied events, most of them unexplainable, take place in the realm of tapas. The period of tapas can extend to an indefinite period or may be shortened and last forever. Much depends on the manastattva, the firm attitude of mind. However, in the normal course of tapas, following events come to one's experience. Secretions of juices O2 and O3 are gaseous. Then there are innumerable secretions, most of them are chemical and liquid. Take for instance the secretions of glands. One set of glands, salivary, digestive and sweat glands, become very active and begin to secrete juices to the outside. Salivary secretions in the form of saliva aid chewing and in the act of maceration. In fact, food should be macerated with the help of saliva. Next comes the effective secretion of digestive juices. Indigestion vanishes. JAPA brings about sweating. Jesus Christ talks about sweat of the eyebrows. Yes, the brisk and vigorous gatagati induces heavy sweating. Toxic wastes are thrown out from the skin and one feels fresh. Then there are very significant secretions about which much is talked about in the yogic text. The reference is to three different and distinctive secretions called Soma, Madhu and Amrita. They are experienced at different stages of tapas in the same order. All the three owe their secretions to the endocrine glands. For a human organism to survive in a variable and hostile environment, regulatory mechanisms are essential. We have two major regulatory systems, the nervous system and the endocrine system. Both the systems are not mutually exclusive but overlap in form and function. Hypothalamus acts as an interacting center for both the systems, particularly the autonomic, and is the major site at which their activities combine. The endocrine or ductless glands are so called because they secrete substances directly into the bloodstream. The active principle which they secrete are called hormones, which are transported into the blood to exert specific effects on cells removed from the site of origin. A hormone is a chemical substance that is secreted into the body fluids by one cell or group of cells and that exert a physiological control effect on other cells of the body. The basic types of hormones are proteins or derivative proteins or amino acids and steroids. There are 8 endocrine glands which together weigh only about 2 ounces, that is 60 grams. The hormones they secrete are very powerful beyond belief. A drop more or a drop less can have earth-shaking effect on the glands we mean. The endocrine system consists of the thyroids, the pineal, the pituitary, the parathyroids, thymus, adrenals, pancreas, ovaries in the females, and testes in the male. Now about the soma juice. The sadhakas will get this juice early in his tapas. It is secreted by the hypophysis cerebri, that is the pituitary gland. It is a small gland about 1 centimeter in diameter and about 0.5 to 1 gram in weight. This gland lies in the hypophyseal fossa of the sphenoid bone at the base of the brain, almost in the center of the head. It is connected with the hypothalamus by the hypophyseal stalk. 50,000 or more nerve fibers enter this fragment of tissue, while enormously rich blood supply carry its chemical messengers, that is hormones, to the rest of the body. The hypophysis cerebri is divisible into 2 distinct portions. One is adenohypophysis, that is anterior pituitary, and neurohypophysis, the posterior pituitary. Adenohypophysis produces 6 major hormones which play major roles in the control of metabolic functions throughout the body. Neurohypophysis produces 2 hormones. All secretions by the gland are controlled by either normal or nervous signals from the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is a collecting center for information concerned with the well-being of the organism, and in turn this information is used to control the secretions of the hypophysis cerebri. Its hormones act as stimulus on specific thyroid, adrenal cortex, ovaries and testes and the mammary glands. Thus the pituitary is the most remarkable component of the organism. A master indeed among the glands. So much juice is often mentioned in the scriptures. It is said to be the expressed juice of climbing creeper, Sarcostema viminalis, used in yagnas. It is also referred to as a liquor, but in tapas, it is a juice secreted by hypophysis cerebri. It is a nectar, an intoxicant, highly exhilarating and soothing. What happens after secretion is that the practitioner goes into a sleepy mode owing to the intoxicant quality of soma. One is always likely to succumb to its charm and lose consciousness and then sleep for hours on end, deluding him into believing that he was deeply meditating. It happens quite often. Over a period of time, the result of the secretions of soma is multiple, mind becomes calmer and happier. Nervous excitement comes down, body gets a peculiar shining, one gets less argumentative and always in contented mood. IQ increases, mind becomes capable of perceiving issues of life in a better way. In fact, soma means manas. Madhu is a next major secretion. It boosts tapas tremendously.